Welcome to Story Spieler. I'm your narrator, Roy Trumbull. Today we have an account of a quest by the author Washington Irving to find something he could write about Shakespeare that would break new ground. Irving had to take a trip to England on family business and wanted to also be productive. Even 200 years ago, the wealth of texts on the Bard was staggering. He finally found a topic worth pursuing. For those few of you who have somehow missed seeing a production of Henry IV Part 1, I'm going to do a brief portion of a scene which is set in the Boar's Head Tavern. In it you will meet Prince Hal and one of Shakespeare's most beloved characters, Sir John Falstaff. From Henry IV Part 1, Act 2, Scene 4, at the Boar's Head Tavern. Falstaff and Prince Hal are role-playing. For the moment, Falstaff is Prince Hal's father, the king. A little later, Prince Hal takes the fatherly role, and Falstaff becomes the errant Prince Hal. Peace, good pint pot, peace, good tickle brain. Harry, I do not only marvel where thou spend'st thy time, but also how thou art accompanied. For though the chamomile, the more it is trodden, on the faster it grows, yet youth, the more it is wasted, the sooner it wears. Thou art my son. I have partly thy mother's word, partly my own opinion, but chiefly a villainous trick of thine eye, and a foolish hanging of thy nether lip that doth warrant me. If then thou be son to me, here lies the point. Why, being son to me, art thou so pointed at? Shall the blessed Son of Heaven prove a Mitchner and eat blackberries? Question not to be asked. Shall the Son of England prove a thief and take purses? A question to be asked. There's a thing, Harry, which thou hast often heard of, and it is known to many in our land by the name of pitch. This pitch, as ancient writers do report, doth defile. So doth the company thou keepest, for, Harry, now I do not speak to thee in drink, but in tears. Not in pleasure, but in passion. Not in words only, but in woes also. And yet there is a virtuous man whom I have often noted in thy company, but I know not his name. What manner of a man in it like, your majesty? A goodly, portly man, i' faith, and a corpulent, of a cheerful look, a pleasing eye, and a most noble carriage, and, as I think his age, some 50, or later, inclining to 60. And now I remember me, his name is Falstaff. If that man should be lewdly given, he deceiveth me, for, Harry, I see virtue in his looks. If then the tree may be known by the fruit, as the fruit by the tree, then, peremptorily I speak it, there's virtue in that Falstaff. Him keep with, the rest banish. And tell me now, thou naughty varlet, tell me, where hast thou been this month? Dost thou speak like a king? Do thou stand for me, and I'll play my father. Depose me? If thou dost it half so gravely, so majestically, both in word and matter, hang me up by the heels for a rabbit's sucker or a poultice hair. Well, here I am set, and here I stand, judge my masters. Now, Harry, whence come you? My noble lord, from East Cheap. The complaints I hear of thee are grievous. Spled, my lord, they are false. Nay, I'll tickle ye for a young prince, i' faith. Swearest thou, ungracious boy? Henceforth ne'er look on me. Thou art violently carried away from grace. There is a devil haunts thee in the likeness of an old fat man. A ton of man is thy companion. Why dost thou converse with that trunk of humours, that bolting hutch of beastliness, that swollen parcel of dropsies, that huge bombard of sack, that stuffed cloth bag of guts, that roasted Manningtree ox with a pudding in his belly, that reverend vice, that grey iniquity, that father ruffian, that vanity in years, wherein is he good but to taste sack and drink it? Wherein neat and cleanly but to carve a capon and eat it? Wherein cunning but in craft? Wherein crafty but in villainy? Wherein villainous but in all things? Wherein worthy but in nothing? I would your grace would take me with you. Whom means your grace? That villainous, abominable misleader of youth, Falstaff, that old white-bearded Satan. My lord, the man I know. I know thou dost. From the Sketchbook of Geoffrey Cran, by Washington Irving, a revised edition published in 1848. The Boar's Head Tavern, East Cheap, a Shakespearean research. He begins with a poem by Mother Bomby. A tavern is the rendezvous, the exchange, the staple of good fellows. I have heard my great-grandfather tell how his great-great-grandfather should say that it was an old proverb when his great-grandfather was a child, that it was a good wind that blew a man to the wine. It is a pious custom in some Catholic countries to honor the memory of saints by votive lights burnt before their pictures. The popularity of a saint, therefore, may be known by the number of these offerings. One perhaps is left to moulder in the darkness of his little chapel. Another may have a solitary lamp to throw its blinking rays athwart his effigy, while the whole blaze of adoration is lavished at the shrine of some beatified father of renown. The wealthy devotee brings his huge luminary of wax, the eager zealot his 7-branched candlestick, and even the mendicant pilgrim is by no means satisfied that sufficient light is thrown upon the deceased unless he hangs up his little lamp of smoking oil. The consequence is that in the eagerness to enlighten they are often apt to obscure, and I have occasionally seen an unlucky saint almost smoked out of countenance by the officiousness of his followers. In like manner has it fared with the immortal Shakespeare. Every writer considers it his bound duty to lighten up some portion of his character or works, and to rescue some merit from oblivion. The commentator, opulent in words, produces vast tomes of dissertations. The common herd of editors send up mists of obscurity from their notes at the bottom of each page. And every casual scribbler brings his farthing rushlight of eulogy or research to swell the cloud of incense and of smoke. As I honor all established usages of my brethren of the quill, I thought it but proper to contribute my mite of homage to the memory of the illustrious bard. I was for some time, however, sorely puzzled in what way I should discharge this duty. I found myself anticipated in every attempt at a new reading. Every doubtful line had been explained a dozen different ways, and perplexed beyond the reach of elucidation. And as to fine passages, they had all been amply praised by previous admirers. Nay, so completely had the bard of late been overlarded with panegyric by a great German critic that it was difficult now to find even a fault that had not been argued into a beauty. In this perplexity I was one morning turning over his pages when I casually opened up the comic scenes of Henry IV, and was in a moment completely lost in the madcap revelry of the Boar's Head Tavern. So vividly and naturally are these scenes of humor depicted, and with such force and consistency are the characters sustained, that they become mingled up in the mind with the facts and personages of real life. To few readers does it occur that these are all ideal creations of a poet's brain, and that in sober truth no such knot of merry roisterers ever enlivened the dull neighborhood of East Cheap. For my part, I love to give myself up to the illusions of poetry. A hero of fiction that never existed is just as valuable to me as a hero of history that existed 1,000 years since. If I may be excused such an insensitivity to the common tie of human nature, I would not give up Fat Jack for half the great men of ancient chronicle. What have the heroes of yore done for me or men like me? They have conquered countries of which I do not enjoy an acre, or they have gained laurels of which I do not inherit a leaf, or they have furnished examples of hare-brained prowess which I have neither the opportunity nor the inclination to follow. But old Jack Falstaff, kind Jack Falstaff, sweet Jack Falstaff, has enlarged the boundaries of human enjoyment. He has added vast regions of wit and good humor in which the poorest man may revel, and he has bequeathed a never-failing inheritance of jolly laughter to make mankind merrier and better to the latest posterity. A thought suddenly struck me. I will make a pilgrimage to East Cheap, said I, closing the book, and see if the old Boar's Head Tavern still exists. Who knows but I may light upon some legendary traces of Dame Quickly and her guests. At any rate, there will be a kindred pleasure in treading the halls once vocal with their mirth to that the toper enjoys in smelling in the empty cask once filled with generous wine. The resolution was no sooner formed than I put in execution. I forbear to treat of the various adventures and wonders I encountered in my travels, of the haunted regions of Cock Lane, of the faded glories of Little Britain and parts adjacent, what perils I ran into in Cathedral Street and Old Jewry, of the renowned Guildhall and its 2 stunted giants, the pride and wonder of the city and the terror of all unlucky urchins, and how I visited London Stone and struck my staff upon it in imitation of that arch-rebel Jack Cade. Let it suffice to say that I at length arrived in merry East Cheap, that ancient region of wit and wassail, where the very names of the streets relished of good cheer, as Pudding Lane bears testimony even to the present day. For East Cheap, says old Stow, was always famous for its convivial doings. The cooks cried hot ribs of beast roasted, pies well baked, and other victuals. There was clattering of pewter pots, harp, pipe, and psalteries. Alas, how sadly is the scene changed since the roaring days of Falstaff and old Stow! The madcap roisterer has given place to the plodding tradesman, the clattering of pots and the sound of harp and psaltery to the din of carts and the accursed dinging of the dustman's bell, and no song is heard save haply the strain of some siren from Billingsgate chanting the eulogy of deceased mackerel. I sought in vain for the ancient abode of Dame Quickly, the only relic of which is a boar's head carved in relief in stone, which formerly served as the sign, but at present is built into the parting line of 2 houses which stand on the site of the renowned old tavern. For the history of this little abode of good fellowship, I was referred to a tallow-chandler's widow opposite, who had been born and brought up on the spot, and was looked up to as the indisputable chronicler of the neighborhood. I found her seated in a little back parlor, the window of which looked out upon a yard about 8 feet square, laid out as a flower garden, while a glass door opposite afforded a distant view of the street, through a vista of soap and tallow candles, the 2 views which comprised in all probability her prospect in life, and the little world in which she had lived and moved and had her being for the better part of a century. To be versed in the history of East Cheap great and little, from London Stone even unto the monument, was doubtless in her opinion to be acquainted with the history of the universe. Yet